People with weird obscure jobs. What is your job and how did you get the job? Story 1. I was a puppeteer for many years and I actually got that job from an ad in the classifieds. It cracks me up that there is a scene in Being John Malkovich where he tries to find puppeteer in the classifieds and fails. Story 2. I'm a house manager for a family of 4. Basically I'm a female butler. I've worked for them for 14 years starting as the kids' nanny. They're my second family pretty much. I organize tradespeople, holidays, birthdays, daily meals, dinner parties, housekeeping, the list goes on. It's challenging at times but keeps me on my toes and I enjoy that. Story 3. I don't know if this is obscure, but my boyfriend is a high-rise window cleaner. There are only 4 in our city. He loves his job. Sometimes when he is working, I will go to the city to the building he is cleaning and look up at him on the street. So cute. Edit. Only 4 high-rise window cleaners. We live in a small Canadian city. Also fun fact, one day I was in the city and he was on his lunch break, so he took me on the roof of the tallest building and me looking over the city. I'm a hostage survival trainer. I was working in international development within IT, and was asked to go and sort out the finance system in Iraq back in 2007. The ministry I was working in got attacked by a militia, and myself along with my 4 guards got captured. Over time the guards were killed and I got released in an exchange deal after being held for over 5 years. I did an AMA about it some years ago. Story 4. Concrete petrographer. I just started this month. I studied geology in college and now my job is to look at concrete using petrographic methods I learned at school and conduct ASTM tests to determine quality of concrete. Very interesting work because concrete is engineered rock and there's a lot more to it than you think. Story 5. I work in a clinical lab where I get to play with baby sweat for a bit of my day. We are testing for chloride level. Increased chloride in sweat is one of the diagnostic markers for cystic fibrosis. I am a clinical laboratory scientist. Not all clinical labs perform this test, but I am lucky enough to work at a lab where we do a couple interesting low-volume tests. Story 6. I cleaned grills for super rich people in Palm Beach. Even got to clean Michael Jordan's at one point, and it was recommended to me from a friend who was in sobriety with me after I got clean. Story 7. I'm a potter. Not sure if that fits the bill for weird. I used to be the manager for a museum art school, and began taking classes there years ago, eventually transitioned into being a full-time potter and pottery teacher. Story 8. I used to cut pictures of wee-wees and ho-has off packaging of adult toys, all day every day. I got the job by being able to pass a drug test. The interview boss, can you pass a drug test? Me, yes boss, you sure? Because if you don't pass I won't hire you. Me, I understand boss, if I pay for your test and you fail I'll be mad. Me, I haven't smoked in like 3 months, don't worry. Story 9. I spent a year on a team reclassifying the Duke University library system from Dewey Decimal to Library of Congress. Had to learn like 4 different alphabets just to label them properly. Edit. Holy mother. Didn't think anyone would care, but I can explain a couple of things. 1. Duke University has one of the largest research libraries in the world with millions of books. In addition to the main library, we went through engineering, biology, art and divinity. There was also another main library on East Campus. The whole operation took about 2 years, I think. I was there from December 2006 to February 2008 when the project ended. 2. The Dewey Decimal System works perfectly well for small American libraries that cater to an English-speaking, Judeo-Christian populace. The Library of Congress system is more egalitarian and perhaps more importantly, has unassigned sections for disciplines that have not yet been discovered. Large university libraries and other world-class collections are better served by the lock system. 3. I don't quite remember the number of people on our team, but it was about 15 of us doing the physical labor. We were a company that did contract work for libraries. We mostly lab-led books, scanned barcodes and reshelved. 4. The reason I learned those alphabets was because we had to meet production and the barcode sheets only used the Latin alphabet. Most of the time the barcodes on the book and the labels matched, but sometimes they didn't or were missing altogether, and then you'd have to waste precious time figuring out what was going on. ID scope ahead when we were about to hit a section in another writing system to make sure I was prepared. Story 10. So not job, but company industry. I was their first marketing person. I worked at a company that specialized in phased array ultrasonic non-destructive testing. The technicians made a ton of money and got to work in crazy places like nuclear power plants in Canada and offshore oil rigs in Norway. They even worked on some of the NASA launching pads. Story 11. Past job. I worked at a whorehouse. I was the receptionist. Guys would come and ID buzz them in after confirmation of their appointment from the intercom. They would enter, check ID, get then a water or pop, take payment, then ID call the girl from the intercom and they would let him to the room. It is technically an adult massage parlor. I applied off Craigslist, went for the interview. Only real rule was receptionist cannot become escorts and escorts cannot after chose to be reception. Story 12. I recently started working in a carrot factory. I stand at a conveyor belt as carrots roll past me and pick out all of the moldy ones. How did I end up in this job, you ask? I decided to do an arts degree and now have no career prospects. In all seriousness though, I work with a lot of migrant workers who work extremely hard doing a job they are accused of coming to this country and stealing. They are lovely people who take a lot of care while dealing with the food products and they deserve all the respect in the world for continuing to work hard during the pandemic. Story 13. Mine isn't necessarily weird, but how I fell into it was. Around 10 years ago I was working in the IT industry. I decided to help my dad out one weekend sell hunting gear at a Militaria Expo, basically antique military gear and army disposal. One of the sellers had a vampire killing kit. Knowing very little about antiques at the time, I pulled out each piece. Checking them over, the story checked out, did some research on my phone throughout the day and found out that it could be a fake in two ways. It could be a kit put together by someone out of antique pieces to make it seem real. And technically, even if it was authentic, it was a Victorian fake. With the fear of vampires in the late 19th century, con men put together vampire killing kits and sold them to rich businessmen visiting Europe. What stood out to me, though, was the main reason I bought it. In the middle of the kit was a crucifix with an ivory inlay that doubled as a god percussion pistol. Long story short, I took a chance, spent $1,000 on it, and got persecuted by my father for such a dumb move. I didn't have much in my savings at the same. I took it to Ripley's Believe It or Not in Australia, and they flew someone out from the US to look at it, which was pretty exciting. Within 5 minutes of looking at it, they offered me a ridiculous sum of money for what I thought was a large investment to begin with. While in ways I do regret selling the kit, it allowed me to start a career in the antiques trade. 5 years later, I moved to the UK to study a degree, and now I specialize in rare obscure antiques that have allowed me to travel all around the world sourcing new weird objects. P.S. Don't worry, I gave my dad a cut of the vampire kit profits for believing in me. Story 14. Official court stenographer. I type everything everyone says in court. I was told about it in high school and thought it sounded cool, so I went for it. Took 12 years in college, but I'm nationally certified to type 260 WPM and regularly push above 300 WPM in court. Story 15. Ill answer for a friend of mine, former college roommate. He works for a company which makes coin and paper money sorting and counting machines. They pay him to stay home and be on call. He's a happy guy. I don't know how he got the job, but he's extremely mechanically inclined and pretty inventive. Though calculus tripped him up and he failed college, when he was in high school, he mounted a model rocket like a hood ornament on his car, controlled by a button on the dash. Push the button and it fires the rocket. Story 16. Not weird but pretty rare. I'm a professional winemaker. How I got it? I have a university degree in winemaking viticulture enology from University of California, Davis. Worked many harvests. Now I run my own winery. It's my dream job and I made it happen. Story 17. In the summer, I guard and clean the toilet units, not the toilets for festivals. I got the job trying to find a cheap way to go to the big festivals, and this organization was looking for volunteers. So all I have to do is stand in front of the units, make sure the ground stays clean, everyone had toilet paper, and clear a block of units so the cleaning team can do their job. Another part of the job is making sure no one dies or passes out in such an unit. You can't imagine how many drunk, often naked people we need to get out of these units, and them to the first aid. Story 18. I work as a handyman at a hotel. We do everything from maintenance to build mobile bars in funny shapes. We basically just do what the manager wants us to do, so we get funny projects like installing LED and 24/7 music into old broken jukebox machines. I was just lucky a former person quit, so I could take the position. Story 19. I work in QC quality control for media. In one company they occasionally paid me to watch to make sure it was in sync and in good quality for video on demand distribution. In another company I spent years watching movies before release in secure theater-like rooms, to make sure the files are ready for distribution, subtitles and audio in sync, no picture corruptions, stuff like that. I always got to watch the biggest movies of the year in a giant screen weeks before they were released, sometimes months. I got the job by going to film school. Story 20. I have a job tracking rodents in restaurants. I set up cameras, movement sensors, IR sensors and other gear, and get an idea of the problem and how to fix it. Hey, race a video of a couple of teenage girls checking out one of my cameras. Sometimes I'm in a hot roof area of a restaurant trying to get the super rats to back off and let me work. I use a Bluetooth speaker and Prodigy on full volume. Who knew rats don't like Prodigy? Despite that, I love my job and the pay is pretty good. Story 21. Stagehand. At least I was pre-COVID. But anyway, I set up everything from huge concerts and Broadway shows to small private events and interviews. It's a wonderful job and I love the people I work with. Story 22. I mix fire retardant for fighting wildfires. A lot of people know that airplanes drop retardant on fires, but don't think about the millions of dollars of infrastructure that is behind that operation. Everyone who works at my base started by working at the local ski resort. It's a good way to earn enough money in the summer to coast all winter, so we keep the jobs among fellow ski bums. Story 23. I work as an air traffic controller. Not weird, but not many of us around. I pretty much fell into it after passing an aptitude, and it's just been swell since, albeit, the classic phrase from strangers isn't that the job with the most suicides. It might be, but I don't know anyone. It's actually super chill and rewarding when you get it right. We always try get it right, but when you get it super right, you're dead pleased. Story 24. I'm an assistant curator in numismatics. Basically, I manage our museum's collection of ancient coins. It's a small museum, which explains why I even have this job, as I'm not a professional numismatist, but we have a pretty sizable collection of mostly Roman coins. But we also have Greek, Hellenistic, Byzantine, medieval European, Chinese, Islamic and Crusader kingdom coins. I catalog coins, appraise them, do any research that is required and help incorporate coins into our exhibits. I also do educational outreach, so I hold workshops for our volunteers and the public. I work with professors in the history and archaeology departments of the university we're attached to in order to help them incorporate numismatics into their curricula. Edit forgot to add how I got this job. Basically, I came to university and decided to volunteer with the museum because I like history. I did tech support for the first year, and then the director asked me if I would like to train in numismatics. I said sure. 5 years later here I am managing the collection, full-time in the summer and part-time during the academic year. Story 25. I used to digitize my local newspaper's old photo negatives for the local archives. I got to see the most amazing snapshots of everyday life, and how my hometown lived through and reacted to major world events, such as the world wars and the rise of technology and innovation. It was a great job and I got to bring the pup to work. Story 26. For 4 years I was a fake priest in Japan. I first worked for a company making $90 to $100 for a 15-minute ceremony. When I found out I could cut out the middleman, I started on my own and started making $200 a wedding. I remember one day I had 6 weddings back to back and made $1,200 in a day. This was huge back when I was living in an English teacher salary in Japan. It was so much fun. The brides were more than often super hot and so were many of the guests. I felt like Jesus but kind of dirty. There was one time when the Japanese family was actually Christian and they freaked me out when they actually started singing along with our hymns. I had to remember not to make the Catholic cross gesture because I was dressed like a Protestant. It really threw me off my game. One time I had to read a scripture in Dutch. I told the organizer that I don't speak Dutch and they told me just to make it up, so I went full Swedish chef and everyone loved it. It was definitely one of the coolest and easiest money jobs I have ever had. I also got huge discounts and free parking at the hotel I worked at along with free bento lunches each day I worked. 1010 would do it again. Story 27. From 15 to 18, I worked at a glorious dog daycare in a huge air-conditioned building. With so many dogs I worked for them 21 years ago, and they're still thriving. I see employees around town wearing the shirts "Pay me to pet dogs." How could you say no? Story 28. I used to be a hand model. Apparently I have really good-looking hands. Although they look completely normal to me, people were always asking me how I got into it, so it was fun to bullshit people I was discovered on the street. Now I moisturize 15 times a day and sleep with my hands in plastic bags. The money was great, but I'd have to spend long days on set being careful not to wreck my manicure. Which they paid for, of course. Also paid for the time it took to get the manicure. Mostly did TV commercials. Now I tell people at parties I'm a retired international hand model, but gave up show business for the much more worthwhile and rewarding career of teaching kids to read. Story 29. I design water parks. I went to college for graphic design and advertising. In my last year I had to do an internship, so I took one at an aquatic engineering firm to help organize photos. 10 years later I am a project manager and create resort deck and water park programs. Story 30. My dad told me of this one time he went to my mom's work Christmas party. She was a banker. As the bankers talked shop and tried to sound impressive, the spouses grew bored and talked among themselves. The guy who drew the biggest crowd was this man who worked at a toilet factory and he did quality control. His job was to flush toilet paper and simulated down the toilet. The people at the party, especially the men, were riveted by his descriptions and peppered him with questions while all these upper management bankers looked on with irritation. Story 31. Working in college student affairs is kinda weird what I do. Most go to school for a master's degree to enter the field, but it's a job or profession that no one talks or knows about until they fall into it towards the end of their undergraduate career. It's laughable how many in the field have this story. It was my senior year of undergrad, and I was just a couple months from graduating and work in X field with my degree. My on-campus job supervisor approached me and asked, "You're really good at this. Have you considered working in student affairs as a career?" I said, "No, what's that?" They explain it's what they do, and what they got their masters in. I said, "You can go to school for masters and do what we do as a career." They said yes, so I said, "Son of a, I'm in." Now I'm here. Story 32. I'm a Chiron operator. I trigger motion graphics on live TV. I was an art student and also was in stage crew in high school. These things got me jobs backstage in theater, which got me a job in TV doing normal stuff like cameraman and stuff like that. Since I was an art major, I asked if I could do graphics and they let me on the weekends. And my specialty eventually turned to the Chiron, which ingests the graphics that artists make and plays them back through the switcher that controls the news broadcast. It's not technically an art position, but at my job specifically I could make the graphics in After Effects and Photoshop during the day if I have a computer free, and in the afternoon I play the Chiron. Usually you are one or the other because Chiron operators don't need art skills. It's just another tech job like audio operator or camera operator or stage manager or whatever. These kinds of jobs are getting rarer because they are being automated. But since I'm also an artist I get to keep my job because if someone leaves I can take their job. Story 33. My parents are escape artists and escape consultants. It's quite a niche in the magic world. My dad started as a magician doing birthday parties as a teen, then got really into escapes, then became the one guy designing and consulting on escapes for famous top magicians. Story 34. I have been an online community manager for over 20 years. I started in video games and moved into technology companies. I've worked on everything from Star Wars to telecommunications networking equipment and software that help companies move data fast. It started as a hobby. I was a web developer, so very fluent with the web. Started a fan site and grew up at large. Moved on to volunteer for another game company who eventually hired me full-time. TLDR turned a hobby into a career. Story 35. A friend's sister is a customer service rep for a company that recovers lost stolen medical equipment on airplanes. As for how she got the job, we have no clue, and she majored in museum studies in college. Story 36. Not my job, but the product. I sell toilets to companies that want to be sustainable. Washrooms are the place in a building where most of the water is used, and within the washroom, it's the toilet that wastes the most water. We should all be preserving as much water as we can, so my company does it with toilets. It's not something anybody really thinks of, but there is a lot of wordplay and fun to be had. My fave line is saving the world, one flush at a time. Story 37. Cameraman for Live PD. Went to film school to make movies, then slowly worked through Ice Road Truckers, Axemen, Boston's Finest, and Night Watch. Found out I have a perfect blend of art and athleticism that can be hard to find. Story 38. I am studying conservation and restoration of patrimony. I have entered to tombs with archaeologists, and I am the one who get the bones out, stabilize them, and make them presentable for museums. Also, I worked in a church. I had complete access to all the rooms, so there are like hidden halls and basements, and it's usual to find skeletons or ancient things in there. The atmosphere is quite creepy, humid, and dark. Story 39. My job is to find old, sometimes obscure and sometimes BC titles of abandoned video games, then buy the rights and revive the IP, now venturing into cartoons, comic books, and toy lines. Story 40. Not terribly weird, but definitely unique. I own a handmade business and I make cool things out of felted sheep's wool. It started so I could have extra cash to pay off my nursing school loans. Then I quit my nursing job. Now I am a top 1 seller on Etsy and get to sit around and craft fun and colorful items that I ship all around the world. Story 41. I do closed captioning for in real-time phone calls. You've probably been captioned before and didn't know it. Edit clarification. I caption verbally into a computer program. I don't use sign language though, would love to learn. Story 42. I analyze satellite imagery for the government, but not quite in the way you may think. Instead of foreign target assessment, I look at U.S. crops. When a farmer has a loss and files an insurance claim that is subsidized by the U.S. government, we need to ensure the claim is legitimate, and that tax dollars are not being wasted. We also do damage assessment after catastrophic weather events. We use weather data, multispectral satellite imagery, aerial imagery, production data, site visits, and so on. If there is enough evidence, we build a case, then hand it off to the Office of the Inspector General and U.S. Attorney's Office. It is different from day to day. I get to learn about a lot of different crops and get out and about, see where our food comes from, and meet a lot of good producers. Story 43. I manage a motel and marina in a vacation town in Wisconsin. We're directly on a large lake and we're popular because golf around here is good, and we offer a free boat slip to any guests with boats, so fishermen and boaters can keep their boats on the water throughout their stay. It's not very common to have a motel that does this. I got the job because my parents live in the area and they sent me a photo of the job listing. It said the manager gets to live for free on the lake in an expensive town in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. I have 2 associate's degrees in IT, but I did it out of practicality and not passion. I have an appointment to take my drone Part 107 test, and I want to start my own drone business. Shameless plug, Future Flight Films. I also get to take our rental pontoons out when I have some free time. Work is crazy in the summer, but in the off-season it's so slow and I have a lot of downtime, which is nice. My boss is great and doesn't helicopter. The pay isn't amazing at 25 Kier, but since I don't have to pay rent, mortgage, or utilities, I do pretty well, and during the virus I had the job security and steady pay, so I was very fortunate. Edit mobile format for my website sucks RN. I don't have my Part 107 yet, so I haven't put the final touches on the site or updated the photos in a minute. Story 44. My ex-roommate worked as a security guard at Turtle Store. Why there was a store that sold turtles exclusively I do not know, and why they needed a daytime security team I will also never understand. He said he mostly sat back and watched an indoor turtle pond all day, and there was only 2 other employees, but they made tons of money selling turtle care supplies and turtles. They went out of business and he lost his job, but it's of a story. Story 45. In college, I was a model for life drawing classes. My mother worked in the university art department and told me they had an opening for models. I posed clothed at first, then bit the bullet and posed when the instructor couldn't find anyone else to take the job. He was extremely professional and maintained a comfortable non-atmosphere in the studio. I never became what you'd call an exhibitionist, but it certainly helped me become more comfortable with my body. It was always fascinating to circle the studio on a break and see how the students would draw different poses from different angles. I did it for 2 years at minimum wage, but it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. Story 46. I do network filtering for schools. I'm the guy that stops your kid from looking at when they're supposed to be in class. How I got it? A recruiter asked me if I was interested and I said I was. Story 47. Mechanical design engineer. Currently, I am the guy that plays Factorio in real life by dictating where conveyors go, how they are supported, and destined in some cases. Story 48. Financial controller license holding insurance adjuster branch manager for an environmental contracting company. We do biohazard, trauma, HAZWOPER, water damage, fire damage, mold damage, and lead abatement services. About 98 is billed to insurance carriers. My job is regulatory compliance with certifying entities, ICRC, OSHA, NAIC, ICRC, and NORMI, financial reporting and management, writing and settling estimates, adjusting losses, Tracking Justification and Documents, ECT. Honestly, I just kind of went down the rabbit hole at a job where I used to be a staff accountant. Had an opportunity to advance. Now I know weird things like how aspergillus is 2.5 to 3 microns in size, licensed mold remediator, mold assessor, and blood droplets require removal of carpet pad in a 2 radius or 2 radius for 58 or 12 sheetrock certified trauma biohazard technician. OSHA 40 Haswoper. Story 49 used to be a ghost tour guide at a reconstructed 18th century fort. Best job I ever had. Got to meet thousands of people every summer and heard tons of great stories. Also saw some amazing sunsets. The ghost stuff was pretty cool too, but the people were always more interesting. Just got the job because my best friend was a guide and she told me they couldn't get people to stay because they were too frightened. I stayed for 6 years and only left because I had to. Story 50 I worked as a game master or GM for an obscure MMORPG title that 99.9% of gamers won't know because honestly it was a small game from a developer. I got the job from applying to a job posting on Indeed from a publisher that had just purchased the IP for the game for the North American market. My job initially was localizing the game from start to finish from Korean to English, while localizing things like monsters, NPCs, towns characters, items and skills were all easy and fun. Localizing the quests were pain in the butt and very time-consuming. I'd say it was more akin to translating a book than a video game. We worked from multiple Excel files that were often tens of thousands of lines long, so as you can imagine, localizing a MMO from start to finish is no small feat. And our game wasn't even a big title like WoW. After the game was fully localized and launched, I then transitioned into the role of GM. Being a GM is exactly what you'd expect, and it was hella fun being able to literally play God in the game. I remember equipping my secret account with godly gear and just piking the out of players we didn't like, mostly cheaters, gold buyers, and just BMLL. Remember guys, the GM or GMs are always around you. We're just invisible and chooses not to show ourselves. Story 51 I host a travel show on Kazakhstani national TV. I like languages and had moved to Kazakhstan to learn Kazakh, and a producer saw me being interviewed on another program and met me on Facebook. Now we've shot 3 seasons and explored nearly every region of the world's 9th largest country. P.S. This is not a Borat joke, PPS. Please no Borat jokes. Story 52 I had a summer job where I transcribed interviews for a professor of mine. The interesting part was that the interviews were with political people involved with 911. Andy Card was my longest one. He tends to stutter when storytelling. Story 53 my job basically boils down to finding cool stuff and selling it on eBay. I work for a recovered rich hoarder selling the stuff he collected over years. We have multiple buildings dedicated to stuff piled on top of stuff. Even worse, a lot of expensive items are just sitting out open to the elements. Most of the things are expensive test instruments that would make old-time synth users drool. I found musical instruments, factory equipment, cars, even medical equipment. Whatever it is, we clean it up, take photos, document it, and post it on various selling outlets and auction sites, including Facebook Marketplace. That place is utter. I found the job through Indeed. The pay was great for our area and they even offered a sign-on bonus, which is again unheard of in our small town. I got the job because the manager liked me more than the guys they interviewed and I had a can-do attitude when they showed me the literal massive amounts of items I'd be cataloging. Story 54 I am a professional pencil sharpener and my wife pets canaries. Why yes, we did recently move to Bermuda and have a budget of 1.2 M to buy our dream home by the beach. Why do you ask? Story 55 it's my part-time business right now, but I own a cast iron restoration company. We strip and clean rusty and cruddy skillets, Dutch ovens, and other cookware, then reseason them to preserve the pieces. It was a hobby that turned business. Story 56 during the fall and winter I'm an actor who plays the role of the conductor from the Polar Express. I have to punch tickets, fun but weird party trick, help the passengers board the train and do the hot chocolate dance, just to name a few things. Really fun job, and my train almost always needs more chefs. Story 57 high-rise window cleaner, specifically bosun chair rope rider, and I met my boss fresh out of prison at an AA meeting. Been clean and sober for 4 years now. I have a house, a car, a dirt bike, a dog, and I am a productive member of society instead of falling back into the revolving door of the system. All thanks to hanging off buildings and employer willing to take a chance on a felon. Edit thank you so much for the award. It is certainly a unique job. But for me, I never felt like I fit into normal jobs, so I was open-minded enough to try it out. I instantly fell in love. I couldn't imagine sitting at desk all day. I would rather be in the wind and rain hanging off a building than stuck at a desk. Story 58 I grow specialty cut flowers for florists, as well as for our own weddings events. I had to get somewhere sunnier for the winter so I wouldn't kill myself. Ended up in California working on an organic vegetable chicken goat farm. Moved back home in the spring and was offered a job at a flower farm. Been doing it 6 years. Hope to do it forever. Story 59 I'm an audio transcriptionist, which isn't that exciting. I type up audio files for everything from courts to PhD students to insurance companies. But during one transcript I came across a guy whose job was restoring swordfish bills, especially antique ones. So yeah, his job is to restore and preserve the swordfish bills hung on walls and bars in museums, in rich people's houses, etc. Apparently there's less than half a dozen people in the world that do it, and people will freight swordfish bills to him from all over the world. No idea how he got that job, but it's the most unique job I've ever heard of. He also restored shark jaws. but that was a bit more common. Story 60 not quite as interesting as other things I read, but I know my job is weird even for those I work with constantly. I'm a social worker in the care of the mentally and/or physical disabled. I do tons of things, no day is the same, really, but I'm really the guy who gets to hang around everywhere and listen and make sure everybody involved in a client situation is happy and chasing the same goals. That's not really something you can measure, so I get why some of my coworkers don't really know what I do. I also do lots of paperwork, like just did the taxes for about 50 people. Best part of my job is working with a family and getting someone old or young into a situation where they receive full-time residential care with us, lightening the load on the family and often providing a more stable, intensive environment for the person with a disability. I rolled into it by choosing a major during the last day of enrollment, was on benefits at the time and supposed to look at working option, did not like that and enrolled. Got lucky that the lady at the benefits office was understanding about my desire to learn, really enjoyed my internship in a facility for the disabled and really just never left. Got the job because someone got pregnant. Story 61. I'm a construction photographer with a particular emphasis on the industrial side, though I do end up with regular commercial jobs too, so taking photos of hydroelectric plants, water sewage facilities, water mains, factories, foundries, etc., lots of stuff with security concerns, which means you have to walk a line, but still. It's a lot of fun and really interesting. I just got contacted one time for a hydroelectric gig, had a lot of fun, so things have kinda grown from there. Story 62. I was a relay operator for the deaf. Basically, deaf people would dial in with a text telephone and we would act as their voice. We would then type back responses from whoever they called and facilitate a conversation. I did it in both English and Spanish and did translation. By the time I quit, I could type one thing in Spanish while saying something else in English without looking at my hands. You quickly learn that most people are boring. Scammers, they use relay to hide a foreign accent, and there would be the occasional hilarious call to keep it interesting. The job was advertised in local papers and they were always hiring, so it was an easy get. The company I worked for went out of business, but you can get relay on your phone line from anywhere in the USA by dialing 711. Story 63. I perform necropsies, animal autopsies on zoo animals. Everything from stick insects to elephants. Was a zookeeper for close to 10 years, then kinda fell into it when looking for other jobs to build an alternative skill set while staying at the zoo. Story 64. I used to take pictures of asteroids, calculate their trajectory, and submit it to a database that watched for asteroids who might hit the Earth one day. I got it my first day of a blow-off astronomy class used as a free science credit for the athletes when the professor asked, so who here actually cares about space? I was studying physics with an astronomy specification, so it raised my hand and he said see me after class and gave me the job on the spot. Taught me all the math too since I was only a freshman. I had that job for almost my entire college career and loved almost every second of it.